Salud. Salud por Bolivia.
I'm going to laugh a lot. Here we go. So you can let everybody in.
Okay, I will. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, 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 everybody. I see everybody's pouring in. We are so happy to see you guys. Welcome all. Welcome all. Boy, we have a great crowd today. So happy to see everybody on this class, on this call. We are excited today. We have Bertil Tøttenborg with us, and we're going to wait just a few more minutes to let some more people in. And we're going to start the class. You're welcome to get a drink. You're welcome to relax. Open up your microphones. We're not going to be shy here. You know, open up your mics, ask questions during the class. Feel free to laugh, express yourself. You know, we're going to have fun here, you guys. We got a great guy with us. We're excited to learn about this wonderful country of Bolivia. We're going to start in just a few moments, just to let some more people in. And and I'm so glad that you're here with us today to appreciate a great talk. So, by the way, if you have any questions, feel free to just chime in, right? Bertil is going to let us do that. If you have a phone, however, if you don't mind, please have your phone turned off, just so that we don't have the ringing or something in the middle of class, if you do decide to have your microphone on. We also have a little chat box on the sidebar. Feel free to, if you're shy or something, feel free to ask your questions there as well. Let's let a few more people in. Woohoo! Yeah, we got a great class today. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to welcome everybody, especially the ones who just got here to our class. I think we're going to be starting in just a moment. Just a little word. Housekeeping. If you don't mind, leave your microphones open. We love to hear you chuckle. We love to hear your questions. We love to hear you open up a bottle of wine, whatever it is. Feel free to express yourself during the call. Bertil is open to that. Cheers, Majo. And we'll also have a little sidebar where you can ask your questions. So if you want to ask your questions about whatever it is, Bertil is more than open to answer your questions during his presentation. If not, we can get those done at the end of the call. And I do have a lovely co-host with me today called Maria Caro Riano. Maria, say hello and say a few words for us.
Hi, everybody. Hola todos. Spanish is welcome also. If you guys want to practice their Spanish or talk in Spanish, Bertil is 100% bilingual. Amazing, amazing. ¿Cierto, Bertil? Que hablas español también muy bien.
Sí, también. No, exactly like when we get to questions. So if you have any questions, and if there are people who prefer to ask them in Spanish, then I'm welcome to take them in Spanish, welcome to answer them in Spanish and English at the same time.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, so I think that we're letting one more person in. We're letting a bunch of people in. I am, again, so happy to have you all here. Let me go ahead and start this class and let's get going on learning about Bolivia. I'm excited about having you here today. My name is Bertil Tøttenborg. I'm the founder of Somm Table. I'm, as I already introduced, with my co-host, Maria Carolina Riano, a journalist and an expert in wines and all things related to table, anything that's on top of the table. And she'll be giving a little introduction of herself later. Somm Table has one mission in mind, everyone. It's to create a great community inspired by passion, passion for wine, spirits, coffee, chocolate, and more. You know, anybody who has anything to share, especially to share about great taste, you belong here with us on Somm Table, and we're happy to have you. Now, about our guest today. Born and raised in Copenhagen, Denmark, Bertil Tøttenborg is a certified sommelier by the Copenhagen Wine Academy. He discovered his passion for food as a child when he learned to enjoy different ingredients and cooking styles with his family. It's always where it starts, right? With our family kitchen. As he grew older, he understood that his true calling was in the service area. especially in relationship to wine, beverages, and he focused his studies and his life experience on a prestigious Danish restaurant career, reaching the position of head sommeliers in various restaurants. In 2015, he joined the GUSTU family in Bolivia, where he developed an in-depth knowledge of wine, spirits, craft beers, and coffees. And I'm sure chocolate is in there as well. All of them produced in Bolivia, guiding GUSTU onwards to prioritizing the small production and supporting the production of organic and biodynamic wines. On that note, it's my great pleasure to introduce Bertil Tøttenborg. It's all yours.
No, thank you very much, and thank you all for coming for this class. It's quite a big honor for me to be able to speak about Bolivian wine more than anything. I've now been here in Bolivia for quite some time and tried to study as much as I possibly can in terms of what Bolivian wine actually means. More than anything, because I before I came to Bolivia was not familiar with Bolivian wine, or how do you say? I mean, through various study, never really have touched completely upon Bolivian wine. So it's quite fantastic to get the chance once in a while to be able to speak about something that highly admire and highly feel like have much more potential than how it's shown in the world. So it's quite lovely to see so many people participating and so many people wanting to be part of this. Majo, what are you drinking?
What am I drinking? Oh,
I'm sorry. No, I'm drinking a Russian River Chardonnay. I'm actually in the U.S. I live in Argentina, but I'm traveling, so I just try to. But I really love Bolivian. I'm a big fan of Bolivian wine and Singani as well, and I know that. So that's why I was invited to this class by Majo Granier. So
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I noticed that you want to drink Jardín Oculto. I also like to drink Jardín Oculto, and I think we're not enough to both have Mercedes and Maria Jose who does it.
Yeah, I'm waiting. She promised that she's going to ship to Argentina as soon as it's ready, because we also follow all the history of the story when Nayan arrived on the winemaker arrived on the Jardín Oculto, all his problems and struggle with the stain, the coronavirus. And so it has already a lovely story, so I cannot wait. We have to wait. So we have to be patient. So let's see, let's wait.
Fantastic. I think I'm going to touch upon lightly upon these two wonderful women a little bit later on their amazing wines, but I can tell for everyone who may know 2019 Jardín Oculto that 2020 is absolutely fucking fantastic, and hopefully hopefully a lot of people is gonna have the possibility to taste this. Anyone else who wants to share what they're drinking now? If anyone is drinking besides me, Majo, Maria Caro, and Bertie.
I'm drinking a Chianti Clásico, a very Chianti Clásico.
I'm drinking a Portuguese wine, actually, from the Down area, which is an area right below the Douro. So I'm very happy to be drinking a limestone, wonderful wine, which is good at any time and any place.
Bertil, there's this friend, Lourdes, that she did a practice in GUSTU. She just sent a WhatsApp that she's finishing a tasting, and she's gonna join because she was so excited but had this problem.
But that's good, because Lourdes know me very well, and the first part is only about me. So Lourdes can come later.
Okay, she really speaks very good, very well about you.
And Gilda, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm not drinking right now because I was drinking at lunch, something kind of a strong.
Like what? Tell us.
Chateau is fantastic. And Alejandro?
I'm actually going for a drink. So that's based on a Negroni with barrel Singani. Italian blonde vermouth, and a twist of just a small touch of Campari.
Interesting.
Anyone else who wants to chip in before I tell what I'm drinking?
Yeah, sure. I'm drinking a Bolivian wine from Tarija, Campo de Solana. It's called. It's a classic here in Bolivia.
Yeah.
Can you show us the tag again?
Yeah, sure. Right here. I don't know if you guys can see it.
Campos, perfecto. What
Campos de
variety?
Solana. What? Excuse me?
What grape variety?
Oh, I have no idea. I really don't know much about wines.
Okay.
It's my first time. That's why I came here.
Wonderful. Welcome.
Yeah, I want to learn more about wines, about my Bolivian wines.
Yeah, beautiful, Carlos. Welcome.
Thank you.
Your
Thank
community. You have to be here. Exactly.
Yeah. Cheers, cheers.
And anyone else?
Lorenzo.
Mercedes and I are drinking a bottle of Moscatel De Alejandria of Jardín Oculto.
Great.
Wonderful.
That sounds
Very
good. That sounds
eccentric
good,
that you're drinking your own wine for
Yes.
a podcast about Bolivian wine. I think that's lovely.
How about you, Bertil?
Well, then let me go. I am drinking a wine that is yet to be released so far from a grape variety that is called Cereza. This comes from a tiny winery that is called Cepa de Oro, that is located in Valle de Cinti, which we are going to go a little closer on. And this is a wine that still yet is not on its market, from a very good friend called Jaime Rivera. Jaime, he's a fantastic producer, and he's getting a little closer to get to something that's more natural, little unfiltered, in its true color somehow. And more than anything, a fun story about this wine is that I was so lucky that I was allowed to order this wine before it is in the market, even before he's got his labels for the wine, meaning that the only reason why there is a label on this wine is that he printed one because he panicked. And it's so lovely because this is his best label so far. He usually is not the strongest when it comes to the design of his label. So this is his nicest label so far, done in a panic move more than anything. But the wine is also lovely, and I would love for you guys to taste it. Maybe you get a chance when this is getting out on the market in the end. Enough about what everyone is drinking. I hope that the majority of people actually have something in their glass, because I think it's nicer to share a glass of wine during this explanation of what Bolivian wine actually is. I'm just going to share my screen real quick, and then I'll start showing a presentation for all of you. Again, like Bertie said, that you're more than welcome to chip in. You're more than welcome to ask questions. Just go in whenever you feel like it, if there is anything. Otherwise, you can also keep some questions for afterwards, and there'll be time for talking a bit after this entire presentation. However, the first thing I need to know is if you can all see my screen at this current moment. Yes, fantastic. Good. So basically, this class is called Wines of Bolivia, and I like to call it the hidden gem of South America. Like I quickly mentioned a couple of minutes ago, that more than anything, few people know about Bolivian wine. Even people like me who have been studying wine for quite some time. It's in general not something that you how do you say, that you stumble upon when you either read books or read books about the theory of wine and so on. Bolivia is often not really covered. However, we'll get back to that because to begin with, I would like to, more than anything, besides saying welcome to everyone, to explain you a little bit about who I am. So the ones who do not know me, I can see there's a lot of faces I know, but also a couple of faces that I don't. My name is Bertil Tøttenborg, and I'm the beverage director and the restaurant manager GUSTU, that is located in La Paz in Bolivia. As Bertie mentioned, then I'm from Denmark. I showed up to Bolivia in 2015, and I came to Bolivia because I was so lucky to work many years ago with the former executive head chef Camilla Seidler, who opened GUSTU together with Klaus Meyer in around 2012. At this point, I had worked a little bit with Camilla in Copenhagen before she came here, and had somehow become a quite close friend. And meanwhile, the GUSTU kind of was developing and opening. Then I got a lot of information and a lot of stories about what this project was about. And around the beginning of 2015, then I think we've been talking about the idea of me maybe joining the team in Bolivia. And I mean, Camilla and I, we did in early 2015, we did a pop-up in Copenhagen. That was kind of like, you know, GUSTU for 2 nights. Camilla had asked me to run the floor those 2 evenings. And after this event, very simply, Camilla got me really drunk, and she got me to sign somewhere. And 6 months later, I showed up in Bolivia because I guess I had said yes to something as crazy as go run a beverage program in a restaurant in a country I knew little of, especially in terms of the wine. So I've been in La Paz for the last 5 years. Actually, today is my 5 years anniversary in Bolivia. I showed up the 29th of October in 2015, which was which have been one of the best decisions of my life. I think Bolivia is a very beautiful country. More than anything, huge potential when it comes to exactly what wine is right here in Bolivia. Enough about me. However, speak a little bit about GUSTU for the people who doesn't necessarily completely know. This will maybe also give you a good idea of which direction in terms of my beverage program, which direction in terms of my philosophy that we're going. That for the ones who don't know GUSTU is a restaurant where we only use Bolivian produce. In this case, only Bolivian produce, which also includes the wine list, includes the beverage list, includes everything that we do. Basically, at this current moment, the only thing that's not Bolivian in GUSTU is myself. Besides that, we run a philosophy where we don't necessarily work with traditional recipes. We do a lot of investigation, not only of the produce of the wine in my case, but also in terms of the produce that we use in the kitchen. We create close relationships with our producers and try to either help or guide or at least establish programs where they have the possibility to actually showcase their produce in a restaurant of our style. And more than anything, I think when it comes to my beverage program, it's very important that the wines are as natural as they possibly can be, either whether or not they are organic or biodynamic, or at least in that direction in terms of the production. But I also prefer, in general, when we talk about my wine list, that I know the producer personally, that we have established some sort of relationship. So it doesn't only become about the fantastic wine that they're producing, but more than anything, that we also can tell a story about how fantastic people they are behind of all of this. Going on. When it comes to something as simple as theory about Bolivia, then in this case you can see the map of how Bolivia pretty much looks. For the ones who doesn't know where Bolivia is located, then it's basically surrounded by several countries. It's located in the 15 to the 25th degree latitude. And when it comes to vineyards, then we are speaking about a very low amount of hectares in general of the vineyards. Obviously, the country is much larger than the 3,500 hectares. But when it comes to only vineyards planted, we're talking 3,500 hectares in total. This is tiny. For the ones who doesn't know how much 3,500 hectares of vineyards is, this is tiny. It's basically the size of Saint-Emilion in Bordeaux, which is a sub-region of a French region. And that means that quantities are in general low. When it comes to then the altitude, which is something that's quite important when it comes to Bolivian wine exactly, then Bolivian vineyards are located somewhere in between 1,600 to 3,000 meters above sea level. This is one of the main reasons why wines can be produced in Bolivia, more than anything, because often when you start studying wine, you would often say that vineyards are supposed to be located somewhere in between the 30th to the 50th degree latitude on either the northern or the southern hemisphere. In this case, Bolivia is located slightly too much towards the north, but here is where the altitude shows up, creating a much more temperate, or how do you say, a much more appropriate climate for wine production in general. Speaking a little more about like simple facts, then there are 5 to 6 wine regions, where in general there are more than anything 3 major wine regions, where one is the major wine region, and then besides that the other 2 is tiny. The regions are in this that I've written here is basically located in terms of size. Tarija is the main region, followed by Valle de Cinti, afterwards Samaipata, and then there are another 3 regions where there is a bit of production of either wine or of grapes, which is in between Luribay, Potosí, and Cochabamba. If we start with the main region, Tarija. Tarija is by far the largest wine region of this country. As I mentioned, 3,500 hectares, 2,500 hectares of the entire vineyards of the country are located in Tarija. The meters above sea level in this location are located somewhere in between 1,600 meters and 2,150 meters above sea level. And when we talk about just production of liters of wine, then 90% of the entire production of wine comes from this exact region. This is the region where Carlos, I think, is drinking wine from, where Campos de Solana, for example, is located. This followed by a couple of the grapes that they mainly are using in the region of Tarija, mainly the Moscatel De Alejandria. This is a grape that we're kind of going to be touching upon little by little, and you're going to hear this name quite a bit, more than anything due to the fact that Moscatel De Alejandria takes up just about 80% of the entire grape production of the country. However, Moscatel De Alejandria is not necessarily a very important grape variety when we speak about wine production of the country, more than anything due to Singani, which is a grape distill that you drink quite a lot of here. But besides that, the main grapes of Tarija is grapes that the majority might be familiar with, in between Tannat, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and Syrah and Merlot, where Tannat and the Cabernet Sauvignon are the main grapes in Tarija for actual wine production. And more than anything, being a grape that's quite important for Tarija, something that again we're also coming back to right now. This is just basic facts. So salud for that beginning.
I would never know. I never dream of that you would find Moscatel in Bolivia.
Well, and too much of it. I mean, Moscatel de Alejandria obviously is from Moscatel de Alejandria is originated from Egypt, and have slowly kind of moved its way over to Latin America, and is by far the most important grape for Bolivia. But again, in terms of the Singani, but with plenty of potential to actually become something much more. Right now, Tannat is really the powerful one. if you go to, for an example, Tarija and the wine style that they're working with, then the majority of the production of Tarijeña wine will be some sort of conventional winemaking, at least to the point where there is a lot more control and a lot more technology around or surrounding the production. I've written as well quantity production. And this is, of course, to a certain extent true, but to a certain extent not true at all. We'll go back to the point of the 3,500 hectares. This can never really be quantity production. So even the largest producers of the country, they are quite small if you start comparing them to producers, for example, Mendoza, or certain producers from Chile or France, for example. Besides that, then I've generally felt that what really signifies something about Tarijeñan wine is that they're quite aggressive on their PR and marketing strategies. This means that they have quite a good hold in the local consumer, but also in terms of the ones exporting wines, and they are dominating so heavily the consumption of wine that there almost isn't space for much other people or much other producers in general. I've now put a picture of a producer I actually quite like, one of the largest ones of the country, but one of the producers that slowly have begun, sure, still in quantity production, but really started thinking a little bit more about what they're doing, and really are starting to produce great wines in terms of Kolberg in this case. Tarija and their Tanat is the next thing. I mentioned quickly that Tanat had become a very, very important grape, almost like the pride of Bolivian wine production, more than anything due to a couple of awards or medals that they've won around the world. More than anything, a very important thing that started the entire thing about the Tanat was Tanat al Mundo in 2013, that quite surprisingly awarded a bottle of wine from Aranjuez, a 2012 bottle of Tanat that they called Juan Cruz, to a gold medal. And later on in 2016, then Campos de Solana was awarded with another Tanat inside the Decanter World of Wine Awards, which is something that really created some expectation, and maybe very much so helped structuring a little bit of the Bolivian wine culture, maybe due to the simple fact that Bolivian wine culture was not necessarily so proud of what they had, but exactly with these medals actually could manage to how do you say, feel some sort of pride in terms of what they were doing. Beautifully enough, then Juan Cruz in 2012, this bottle of wine, for me, created a lot of expectations in terms of what Juan Cruz was like. Juan Cruz was, it was like told the story of one of the people working at Aranjuez for the longest amount of time. I created this image that this guy, he was 200 years old. At least if he was alive still, then maybe he was 90 years old. But it came to a surprise when I did a visit at Aranjuez that the guy standing next to me on the picture is Juan Cruz, and is probably not more than a couple of 40 years old. If I go back to the last slide, speaking about this PR and marketing strategy, where I find the larger producers sometimes to be quite aggressive, or at least playing very, very well with the marketing strategy, then exactly this expectation shows this photo pretty well somehow, that Juan Cruz is not 200 years old, but is, I mean, couldn't even be my father at the same time. These two prizes, or these two awards, they definitely did something for the production of wine, especially for the larger producers, but also for maybe the smaller producers, that they got some sort of confidence to a certain extent in terms of what and how they could continue. Maybe more than anything gave them some confidence that they may actually have a chance to be seen, because little by little Bolivian wine is starting to show up in different areas or different magazines or so on. However, then Mercedes and Maria Jose is with us, of course. And I call this bottle of wine the revolution of Tarija. Although that the wine not completely is from Tarija, then maybe still is. This comes from exactly these metals. Maybe it comes from maybe a market that's opening a little by little.
Bertil, I see that Lourdes was able to join. She's already in the meeting.
Fantastic, Lourdes.
Sorry for being late. Hello, everybody.
Nice to do. No, exactly. When you speak about the revolution of Tarija, especially if you ask me, then the market maybe is opening bit by bit, more than anything towards something that is a little more natural or a little more unique. I felt for quite some time that wine from Tarija, although being the main area, or the most famous region of the country, that I think that Tarija sometimes had this tendency to look a little bit too much towards Argentina and Chile when they were producing wine, and I think maybe that's sometimes a little bit sad. More than anything, again, that the altitude is so heavily different that it doesn't necessarily make sense to look towards a different location to create something that may just end up being a bad copy. Or at least never been able to compete in terms of quantity of wine production. I think Maria Jose and Mercedes, they are what I would call new modernists. They have kind of gone away a little bit from the traditional way of making wine, not filtering or at least experimenting a bit with different types of production. In this case, the picture of their 2019 Negra Criolla. And more than anything, I think they are showing the way of the possibility of taking higher risks than many other people have dared to do so in Tarija. It has to be said that Jardín Oculto get their grapes from a completely different location. They get their grapes from Valle Sinti. However, I think that they are Tarijeña because both of them are. So in the end, I think it's still a wine from Tarija somehow. Continuing to a different valley or a different wine region, going slightly north from Tarija. This usually, for the people who doesn't know this, that Valle de Sinti is located around 2.5-hour drive from the city of Tarija, located inside a different department of Bolivia. And it's basically a valley that somehow stretches from Tarija to Oruro, more or less. Somewhere in between, there is the second largest wine region. We are talking again that the second largest wine region is tiny, 400 hectares of vineyards in total, but hopefully with the possibility of a bit of growth. We also talk about that the altitude is slightly higher, which maybe sometimes actually both can create a little more maturity for the wines, but maybe also a slightly bit more acidity and a slightly bit more elegancy. The guy in the picture is a very good friend of mine. He's kind of become he calls me for his nieto adoptivo, which means his adopted grandson. Weimar Rios, he has a fantastic, beautiful winery that is called Cepas de Fuego, that is located in a small town called Villabesia in Valle de Sinti. Here, the grapes are quite distinct, as you may remember back to the Tarijeña grapes that sure we started off with Moscatel De Alejandria, but the turn is slightly to a different direction. More than anything, that they're working with a good portion of Creole grapes. Vischoqueña, Misionera, Cereza, bueno, and then to finish, a little bit of Syrah and a little bit of Pedro Jimenez is something you can find here. Vischoqueña is a highly interesting grape variety for me. A lot of people in general mention that this is a hybrid or a crossing in between the Moscatel and the Misionera. That have basically been created within the last 400 years wine culture in Bolivia, meaning that this grape variety only exists in this part of the country, but also in general in this part of the world. It's a red wine grape. The berries are slightly red with a little bit of hint of green in general. Very, very, very thin-skinned, meaning not a lot of color comes into the wine. Fresh, acidic, super juicy wines that you can get out of this. The Misionera afterwards is a grape that you can call three things more than anything, or at least three things that I think that the majority will know, where Misionera is the main name of it in Valle de Cinti. You can also use the name Negra Criolla, which also is used a bit here in Bolivia. But more than anything, Negra Criolla is used more in Peru. To the end, this is also related to the same grape under a different name that is called País, that I'm sure that a lot of people know from wine production in Chile, for example. Same thing, lightweight grape, plenty of acidity. The Misionera has a good tannin structure in general. Thin skin, so not a lot of color comes out from that. Then Cereza, which is a grape that I encountered not so long ago. Cereza, it's called here, not to be confused with the berry cherry, but it's the name of a variety. Back to what I'm drinking, that's exactly what I'm drinking. Again, light in its color, fresh, acidic, super fruity. Wines that doesn't necessarily need too much touch of oak or too much manipulation, just fermentation and ready to go. And then I'm sure that the majority of you know Sida and know Pedro Jimenez, which is being produced quite a bit here. I want to, in this moment, also speak a little bit about Moscatel de Alejandria, because I generally think that in Tarija there's few producers that are playing around with this grape, but in Valle de Cinti a lot of producers are playing around with this grape when it comes to wine. One of the biggest, one of the biggest challenges I've had in terms of creating a wine list here in Bolivia, finding so much fantastic Moscatel in Bolivia, is that often when you present a wine list to a guest and they want a glass of white wine or they want a bottle of white wine, and they see that 95% of the wines that I work with are done by Moscatel de Alejandria, then they get scared because they think that I have bad taste, and they think that this might be strange Bolivian versions of, I don't know, Moscato d'Asti or something that's over sweet and not interesting. I found that throughout the last 5 years that I'm pretty sure and pretty confident that Bolivian Moscatel is the best Moscatel or the most interesting Moscatel in the entire world. I think it's super complex. I think that due to the altitude, this can grow a quite thick skin, but more than anything, can grow a lot of acidity. That also means that many of the producers are starting to go in a direction that they either want to experiment with skin maceration. More than anything, what they want to do is to work on the direction of very, very dry versions of exactly this. And I think that this is a wonderful direction more than anything, because this makes the Moscatel super complex in general, especially when now producers are starting to experiment a little bit with it, see how far they actually can push a grape that maybe doesn't have the best reputation around the world. But I think this is one of the main grapes when we talk about either the potential of Bolivian wine. This is one of the main grapes that they need to be focused on much more, because, well, for the ones who may know Moscatel from here, it's in general fantastic experiences. For the ones who doesn't know, I highly encourage you to try to find a Bolivian Moscatel, or at least when you come to Bolivia one day, drink a lot of it, because it's quite interesting, quite fantastic, and quite different from the reputation that or Moscatel in general has around the world. Are you all following? Are you all doing well so far?
Yeah.
Good. I'm not speaking too fast or going too fast or anything, no?
No, it's okay.
It's a perfect pace. You're doing good.
we continue.
Oh, those
Yes.
wines you're talking about, Bertil, do they have long shelf life in terms of, you know, the Moscatel normally being that it's used for, you know, for table wines, but also other types of drinks. I mean, do you think it's a grape that can last a bit longer, you know, as maybe 10, 20 years?
Well, I do think so, but it's difficult to say because I don't think anyone have ever tested it. I think, like you're saying, I also think that Bolivia for a long period of time have been maybe making a mistake in terms of the Moscatel, that they haven't necessarily appreciated it and done it as table wine, maybe added white sugar to it to, you know, to please the crowd. I think that much of what is happening right now in terms of many of the wines, I definitely believe that there is a longer shelf life than a lot of people walk around thinking. Especially now, again, when you see a bit of skin maceration in terms of different producers, then I think it can be quite interesting to follow that process. But within my last 5 years, I've tasted wine that is at least that age, and that is still perfectly good, and much of it can easily last at least 5 years, where I think there's plenty of time to go still. A good example is Moscatel De Alejandria from 2016, from a producer in Cochabamba that is called Marqués La Viña, who right now, that wine is performing super well. Or back to my adopted grandfather, his Moscatel from 2016, I mean, right now is performing better than ever. So I think there's plenty of potential when it comes to it. Again, 20 years, not sure. But I guess we need to wait another 15 years to see if that's possible. I'm sure it's possible. When you talk about Valle di Cinti, then besides that they are working with a lot of Creole grapes, so a lot of different unique grape varieties, then in general, I like to think that they are some sort of organic or biodynamic, at least the majority of these producers. Many of them, sure, not certified because certifications are expensive, and right now it's not something that really matters to the production of wine here in the country. But the majority of these producers are not really working with pesticides, not really working with copper sulfides or any help in terms of chemicals. But besides that, also have a tendency to not necessarily add sulfites, or at least add a very minimum amount of sulfites to it. Right now, I think they, more than any time, are more and more focused on quality production. I really think that they have been pushing very heavy ahead the last 5 years. They're focused every single vintage to do better and get better from last year. There is a huge upswing in terms of what they're doing at this current moment. And maybe more than anything, I think here I would like to speak about their potential more than anything, because one thing is that Bolivian wine is not very known. Then even inside Bolivia, Valle di Cinti is not known at all. Very few people in, for example, the city of La Paz knows much about wine from Valle di Cinti. Doesn't really know that it exists. Maybe they've heard about the city of Camargo, or at least they know that there is something in the south of Chuquisaca, which is the name of the department. But I think at the same time that throughout a lot of work these last 5 years in trying to create a different type of market or a different type of wine culture in terms of the consumer, then bit by bit we have managed a lot of, well, myself in the restaurant GUSTU, but also a lot of different restaurants who have started opening with a different level of ambition. They've started to add more and more wine from Valle di Cinti, meaning that the market is definitely opening at this current moment for a lot of producers there to start, one, having a better confidence in terms of what they want to do, not necessarily wanting to just please the crowd or their neighbors, but actually want to please the restaurants that want to show and tell much more about their wines. And that also means that they're willing to take bigger risks. And that of course makes it fantastic for me, because I prefer to drink wine that is unique. And when it comes to Bolivia, then I have this big dream that we can at one point create this niche region, or at least Bolivia being a niche wine country in Latin America. I think, you know, you see around the world, you see so much Chilean wine, you see so much Argentinian wine. People know that there's wine in Uruguay, but I have this feeling that going in the right direction with Bolivian wine, as the culture is changing at this current moment, then it could be interesting to see, you know, the biggest restaurants around the world who does have a tendency to play with different styles of wine, or at least with small wine regions or small wine countries, that Bolivian wine could become something in particular around there. I in general, I mean, I realized a long time ago that there was something very special in, for example, Eastern France. It's a wine region that is called Jura or Jura, which is basically it's a mountain range that splits Switzerland and France. And on the French side, there is this tiny, small wine region that is located very close to Burgundy, making wines in a similar style, however, very, very natural, almost a bunch of hippies that lives here, who kind of created this huge trend that you now see this wine everywhere, if it's in Tokyo, London, Paris, Copenhagen, or New York City, for an example. And I have this feeling that Bolivian wine could become something similar, that if they're focused enough on which direction that they want to go, then Valle de Cindy can be one of the front runners in terms of seeing wine from Bolivia in amazing restaurants around the world, with a lot of people who really knows what they're playing around with in general. We continue, and then the next couple of wine regions we're going to go fairly quick, because as you've seen so far, then the wine regions are basically just getting smaller and smaller, also meaning that there are fewer and fewer producers in these wine regions that you can actually mention. Samaipata is located closing up to the border of Brazil. Here again, you would call it the third largest wine region, which is absolutely bullshit, because it's 100 hectares. But maybe one of the regions that have the biggest potential to grow at this current moment, where I think in general it's seen that there is a possibility to grow until 1,000 hectares just by planting new vines. It's located fairly low, in between 1,600 to 2,000 meters above sea level. And although that there are a couple of producers in Samaipata, then I think in general there's not much more than one that's worth mentioning at this current moment, which are called 1750 Ubairenda, which is a producer that are working with a couple of Bordeaux grapes, or a couple of international grapes, as well as they're working with a bit of Torontés and a bit of Pedro Jimenez. These are quite interesting as well, because for the ones that, for example, live in the States, this is wine you can find in the States, that actually have managed to get their wine so far out to small wine shops in Portland. I know that they have a good portion of wine in Chile, for an example, as well. So these guys have been quite good at moving fast and kind of get their wines out in that low amount that they are producing.
I'm sorry, I missed this. How many producers are in Samaipata?
Well, there are more than one, but there is one producer that's worth mentioning.
Okay.
I mean, at least so far, I have not seen too much wine coming from there that is worth really talking about, besides 1750 Ubairenda.
Yeah, I know that label, or that winery. Also, this is closer to the Andes. How far, if you drive from Bolivia, from Cindy, how it's from Tarija and from the Valle, how far is Samaipata?
Like 16 hours drive. It's far.
16.
See, it's far away.
So it's
this where Tarija is basically bordering to Argentina, all the way in the south. Then this one is more in the northeastern part of Bolivia,
Like near
bordering up to.
Sucre.
Sorry?
Near Sucre.
Not really.
So do you have a map?
Is closer. If you want to, we can go quickly back.
Yes, please, because I'm so excited as well. Okay.
See, so if you see Santa Cruz, that is pretty much on mid-east, closing up to northeast.
Yes.
Closer to Brazil more than anything, where Sucre is located north of Valle del Cinti.
Okay, yeah.
But you know, here in Bolivia, nothing is close, which is a whole different.
No, because you have all the windy, the waves. So maybe it's half an hour. Yeah, I've been there many times, and I experienced that.
It's long drives. See, I mean,
it takes 16 hours.
Long drives, not so long flights, of course, but fairly long drives in general.
No. If you go from Uyuni to El Alto, it's I don't know how an hour flight, and it's 16 hours drive. It's something like that, and you go like that, so and you end up puking. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So thank you for the map again. Okay. Thanks.
Good. Is anyone getting drunk so far?
Not yet.
Not yet. I'll go for the. Are you having Alejandro? You are having the Singani Negroni?
No. Now I moved on to some Peruvian rum. It's 2 in the morning here in Sweden, so this is a good nightcap.
Okay.
Alejandro.
Only heavy liquor at this current moment.
Alejandro, do you have a question, isn't it? You wrote it at the chat that Pedro Jimenez. Okay, please do it.
Yeah, I was wondering. I saw that they grow the Pedro Jimenez, but they use it in some other way that they do in Spain. I wonder if there is some producer that have the idea to go in of doing some kind of sherry or working with another type of grape or doing some dry sherry.
So far I've tried to push a couple of the producer, if it's either with Pedro Jimenez or if it's with another grape, to start working on experimenting with flora or with oxidated wine. So far, none of them dare to do it. Is there a possibility that someone might do it? Sure. I hope. I mean, Maria Jose and Mercedes could be up for it. I don't know.
It would be really cool. It would be really interesting to see how that should be with a Bolivian type of sherry, especially a dry one.
Absolutely, but it's also something that I miss a lot myself to be able to work with. Maria Jose and Mercedes?
Yes, we're considering doing it next vintage, actually. It's in our plans. So we're going to see if we make it.
With Pedro Jimenez or with a different variety?
Actually, with Muscat or white Vischoqueña, we're thinking.
That's very cool. So yes, there you have your answer, Alejandro.
I love it.
Eso vamos a querer probar. Yo soy enferma del velo, Majo. I have a question about the Pedro Jimenez and Pedro Jimenez, because in Argentina we have a Pedro Jimenez with a G that they write it with an X, but it's not the same as the one in Montilla, Moriles, or Jerez. So which one is the one in Bolivia? Is the
they write it with an X and a set, and then there are someone who writes it with a J and a set in the end.
But it's not the same grape. You know that? O sea, you have the Montilla, Moriles one and Jerry one. That is the one with an X, and they're smaller clusters. And then you have the one in Argentina with a G that is totally different family. So that's why I'm asking which one do you have there?
The X and the C.
Excuse me?
The X and the C.
But
if you want to see how I write it.
Okay, no, but it's Andalusian wine one or the Criolla one?
But that is a very, very good question. The big theory in terms of many of the grape varieties that you find here is quite limited. Back to many big ideas. So, for an example, that you have a grape variety here in Bolivia that is called Borgoña, which doesn't necessarily have too much to do with the grape that is better known with the name of Borgoña from different parts of Latin America. So it's a wonderful question, and I must admit that I'm not completely sure what it is. I'm pretty sure, though, that if I have read at one point correctly, then it's the one that is generally used in Spain.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But again, if it goes back to the Visjoqueña as well, then sometimes it can be very difficult in a country like this, where the information is so limited, or the initial information is so limited. And so far I haven't got to send too much grapes to how do you say, to UC Davis or something like this to get them tested. But I'm sure that little by little, then we get closer to the truth. Same thing that there are many how do you say, ideas of what misionera is, where a lot of people say that it's difficult to define. Sure, there is some Pedro Jimenez in there, which comes from Spain, or that was bought by the missionaries. It's one guess half the time when it comes to
the main difference with the Pedro Jimenez from Montilla Moriles to the Argentine wine is that the alcohol. So the Pedro Jimenez from Montilla rises 14 grapes. That's why the Fino from Montilla, it does not need to be fortified. You can have a Fino and Montilla Moriles as difference of Jerez. They don't fortify until you have a Palo Cortado and a Montillado. So that's one of the big difference at least from the Pedro Jimenez that we have from Argentina. It's a totally different grape, and it's low in alcohol.
And of course, the way that you're producing it as well.
Yeah, no, but it's different. The cluster is different. It's ampelographic. It's other family. So that's why I think it's very different. It's very difficult to just, as you were saying, no? Mm. So I'm gonna just do some research on that.
Me too.
Okay, there's two of us.
We're gonna do it together now. We continue. Cochabamba is my next small keyword, but a little like Samaipata, then in Cochabamba you have not more than 30 hectares of vineyard. Maybe not the biggest, how do you say, the biggest potential of a actual wine region, but maybe a fun place to see some wine coming from. And this is completely directed towards a winery that is called Marqués de la Viña. Marqués de la Viña is located just a little bit outside of the city of Cochabamba, in a location that is called Vinto. And for me, it's the only winery in Cochabamba that really has a focus. There is another one called Sandana, which, to be honest, is I think in Spanish you would say más menos. But these two guys, Evelyn and Roberto, for me are two of the most interesting producers when it comes to wine production in Bolivia. More than anything, because they do constant experiments. They have a lot of knowledge in terms of the winemaking process. They buy their grapes all over the country, where their Cabernet Sauvignon is the only one that comes from actual Cochabamba. But then the rest of the varieties they work with come from different locations in Bolivia. They, for example, work with Bonarda, they work with Tanat and Syrah, and the majority of the grapes comes from, or they buy from Tarija. But then if we talk about their Moscatel, for an example, then here we can be talking about Moscatel that is coming from the area of the region of La Paz. It's outside of the city in a location that is called Luribay, that is extremely high in altitude. Something that to me was very important when we speak about Marques La Viña is that these two guys were some of the first ones that really allowed me into their homes and allowed me to bring ideas or how do you say, collaborate in terms of making wine. Besides that, they are really experimenting with new styles. Besides them being very classic-minded, then I've in general thought that they're good at listening. One of the wines in the front of this picture, the one that says Jacques Simon and has a feather on it, is something that we had been talking about for a while, that we wanted to test what could happen if you did a wine or a blend or an assemblage made from 3 different varieties, where Moscatel was one of them, meaning two red varieties and 1 white. Besides that, in 2017, then we started discussing very much about the possibility of making sparkling wine. So I have this very big weakness of sparkling wine. And I was lucky enough that when I tasted their Moscatel 2017 the first time, while it was actually still fermenting, then I called the 2 of them and I said, guys, we need to experiment in terms of making bubbles, because you have a perfect base wine for a second fermentation. That means that the large champagne bottle on the left is one of the first tests that we did in terms of making méthode champenoise of pure Moscatel. We made 98 bottles of this, all labels handwritten. It was a very personal project for Evelyn and for Roberto in the end. And for me, it really showed that there was a huge possibility of playing around with something in the direction of champenoise or petit en nature, at least doing proper bubbles out of Moscatel De Alejandria, which then again resulted in 2019 we tested again in terms of making petit en nature, which is a very fun bottle to drink as well. These guys are definitely worth mentioning when it comes to Bolivian wine, not necessarily because they are coming from a very important location wine-wise in the country, but because they really make Bolivian wine something very specific and very interesting. And then to finish, two locations that are interesting in terms of the production of the grape itself, not really in terms of wine, not really in terms of Singani either. Potosi and Luribay, where this is very tiny, very high altitude. Luribay, for example, reaches around 3,100 meters above sea level. They produce in general a fantastic Moscatel grape. However, they produce quite terrible wine in general. I hope no one in this room is from Luribay at this current moment. But wine from Luribay is not super interesting either. However, for example, Marques La Viña noticed, I mean, the previous producer noticed quite quickly that this was interesting in terms of the Moscatel, and therefore are buying their Moscatel from exactly this region. And this makes me go into something completely different that is not about wine necessarily, but talking about so much about the Moscatel de Alejandria makes me needing to go to touch upon the thing that is called Singani. I have a feeling that the majority inside this room knows what Singani is, but for the ones that doesn't do, then the quick, simple explanation is that it's a grape distill, just like grappa and pisco, for example. But where there is something very interesting when it comes to the Bolivian Singani is that, for example, in Italy, you would often use skin from the grape or the waste from the grape to produce Singani. To produce grappa. And when it comes to pisco from either Peru or from Chile, then you're allowed to use a lot of different varieties for creating your pisco. In Bolivia, you're only allowed to use one single grape, which is the Moscatel de Alejandria. I think I mentioned earlier that 80% of the grapes planted here in Bolivia is with Moscatel De Alejandria. However, I think the latest kind of counts or facts in terms of the Moscatel is that close to 75% of the Moscatel is used for production of Singani. I call it a national drink because everyone drinks this. In this country, there's plenty of ways to drink it, depending on how good it is. You can easily drink this neat. You can drink this with a little bit of ice or a small touch of water. But also you use this in many ways here in Bolivia. If it's either in cocktails, which we do a lot in GUSTU, where we try to do amazing cocktails based on Singani. But more than anything, you build drinks like rum and coke. Here you would drink what you call a chuflay, which is Singani with ginger ale or Sprite or something like this. And then, of course, depending on how much you don't care, then you can buy Singani all the way to $5 per bottle, and you can get really both fucked up and terribly drunk in bad Singani. However, there's also amazing Singani, and I'm not necessarily going to say that the Singani located in the picture is the best, but maybe in terms of how famous Singani is slightly becoming around the world, and maybe this exact brand actually did something that is called Singani 63, which is part of a Singani producer called Casa Real. That's this very big director, Hollywood director and Hollywood producer, Steven Soderbergh, managed to get hold of, and then published this or started launching this as his own brand that is called Singani 63. However, there are fantastic producers, both in Sinti, also a lot of fantastic producers in Tarija. And when it comes to that, this is basically a batch of Casa Real's black label Singani. Then even Casa Real makes much better Singani. That means that if you encounter Singani 63 outside of Bolivia, then try to buy something else, but buy a lot of Singani and start working or drinking it in general. It's an absolutely fantastic grape distill. And you know, not so long ago, I was sitting in an interview with someone who, strangely enough, asked me of my opinion about Pisco, whether or not it was Peruvian or Chilean. I don't know why they wanted me to enter this fight, but obviously for me, the only right grape distill at this current moment is Singani. So for the ones who doesn't drink high quality Singani or have not necessarily tasted it, I think it's a good direction. Besides that, it's also one of the few things, a few beverages here in Bolivia that actually have a denominación de origen. Singani has to, first of all, to explain a little bit on how this works, also not to confuse it with either Pisco that can be aged or cognac that is supposed to be aged or grappa that can be aged. Then Singani has to be from 100% Moscatel de Alejandria. To call it Singani, it can only come from 4 different regions of the country. It has to be Chuquisaca, Tarija, Potosí, or La Paz. Meaning if you produce Singani in, for example, Cochabamba or in Samaipata, Santa Cruz, then you're not allowed to use the name of Singani. And then besides that, you need to age it on a neutral vessel, meaning you're not allowed to use oak or anything that can manipulate the taste of the real fruit. And this is maybe where the Singani exactly becomes so interesting, due to how often you bind the vine to make sure that it gets as much sun exposure. It can get a lot of sugar and a lot of aromatic flavor, and I mean, which is something of the most interesting thing about the Singani, that you can feel the Moscatel is so powerful when we speak about this exact grape distill. So for the ones who doesn't drink Singani or doesn't drink too much of it, in general, this is one of the things from Bolivia that is easily or easiest when it comes to beverages, not necessarily produce, that is easiest to encounter, whether or not you're in Mexico or the States or Argentina or Chile. Even I think that there is a possibility that Singani shows up in Scandinavia at one point.
Well, in Argentina, the thing is that we have a huge Bolivian community. So there's a market, a Bolivian market in the street in Buenos Aires, where you can go and find like the mezclador, the Singani mezclador de Casa Real. Always, it's just you go there. It's in the street. It's like a street market, and it's really easy to find. Of course, it's not the same as the Lucho, for example, but it's very easy to find.
Mm-hmm. No, of course not. I think mezclador or something like this is the easiest because it's also the toughest. The ones you get most hangover of, at least. I think. Mira, we continue to something different, which is kind of where in the direction where I want to finish, which is something that I think is quite important to know. When I like that some people may be smiling because this might be offensive to a Bolivian, but at least when I came here around 5 years ago, I saw something that really frightened me when it came to which direction wine culture was going, or drinking culture more than anything. That in Bolivia you eat to get full and you drink to get drunk, and that means that entire part of enjoying something amazing or actually putting interest in someone who did better work, that was not necessarily very present. You eat a lot of carbs because that makes you full and it costs you little. A lot of Singani is consumed here in the country because, like I said, you can find bottles of Singani for $5 and you can get incredibly drunk in this for absolutely no money. You drink plenty of beer because you can get very drunk and this can get very cheap. However, I think more than anything that within the last 5 years, I think that I've seen a huge change in terms of how Bolivians actually consume. And maybe this is why that Bolivian wine culture is changing as much as it is at this current moment. That people are bit by bit, as maybe the restaurant scene or the gastronomy industry is evolving, then so are the consumer when it comes to wine. And back to what I've mentioned a little earlier, that maybe for some time that a good portion of the country have been eating to get full and drinking to get drunk, then this is basically changing bit by bit. There are much more people who have a level of ambition that's completely different. And this is maybe one of the main reasons why that Bolivia can become a very, very interesting country. First of all, you need to change producers, but producers also need to change together with their people or with the locals. That means that the more people who are actually interested in drinking great wine, that means that producers can actually start producing better wine because people are interested. That means that sorry?
Bertil?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but Daniela had a question about Petnat. Daniela, can you open your mic and make the question, please, before we continue? Daniela, hola. You were talking about the Petit Mathieu, and she said that is it a Petnat?
Correct.
Okay. So Daniela is not here with us anymore, or what? Daniela.
Yeah, she left the room.
Okay. So she had a question.
Thank you. I may have said the word Petit Nature, and there is a shortening for that is Petnat.
Okay. Okay. Continue. Sorry.
One input over there. You're talking about how the culture is changing together with the people and also the producers and the whole path that the food and beverage is actually going. But something that I noticed is that just as soon as you have some more new products that actually people can try out, people open more the wines. Before it was really small of type of products. You didn't have a lot of spirit, you didn't have a lot of wine, you didn't have a lot of beer. Now it's coming new products, and that does so much for the people also to open the eyes and to enjoy it, and not to eat to get full and not to drink to get drunk, instead of notice that shit, there is a really big world in both in food and beverage.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely, of course. I mean, it's quite important to understand that, sure, I'm talking about wine at this current moment, but there are plenty of things that is actually changing exactly in this. And sure, I've written drinking culture, but if you start somewhere, which can either be with a restaurant or with a distillery or with someone who suddenly starts making gin or making vodka, then of course the knowledge of the people or the locals start to completely change. And I think there have been a huge change in drinking culture due to so many different parts of the country within the last 8 years. You can mention GUSTU as one. I think we can take certain part of changing at least gastronomy culture. But if we had been alone in terms of this, and if we had just been going in our own direction with our food, then that wouldn't have been enough. We needed some sort of respect from people from the country, maybe from outside as well. But besides that, we needed help in terms of getting a better beverage list or getting better producers in terms of vegetables or better meat or so on. And of course, it's very worth mentioning that sure, many of the producers are getting better and better when we talk about wine. But also inside the last 8 years, when it comes to Gin La República, for an example, that not only have been producing 2 and now 3 fantastic gins, they are doing vermouth, they are doing a spicy chili liqueur. They have even been producing a little bit of tonic water, so they assured that I at least could serve gin tonics that I could be so proud of. That spired into Vodka 1825, who are producing a pretty good vodka. That have spired into Kilia, who are producing moonshine and is gonna be producing whiskey at one point. And of course, a lot of breweries are starting to show up. If it's either artisanal breweries, but even these artisanal breweries are pushing or pressuring CBN, which is this huge beer company in Bolivia, are even pressuring them to make better beer day after day. So the drinking culture of the Bolivian is changing due to the fact that everyone is changing, but also, of course, due to the fact that the options are much bigger. That means that if there was only shitty wine and if there was only shitty Singani, then sure, it's difficult to actually enjoy it. But when suddenly people start wanting to try more or wanting to consume better, then this is much easier both for the producer, but later also for the consumer to actually start enjoying what they're having.
And Bertil, this is Luis. I know you for a long time, my friend, but I think a big part of this has become GUSTU, because a lot of people couldn't find the small producers of wine and maybe Singanis that you guys brought. When I met you, I remember the first time I came in and you gave me such a big knowledge of all the wines that Bolivia was carrying. And most of the people know the main brands, Campos de Solana, which are good wines. Don't get me wrong, but you couldn't find, Cepas de Oro or anything like that. And I think you guys opening the whole process of using only Bolivian ingredients and products and wine, and also creating the cocktails with different stuff, open up a lot of eyes to a lot of different people. Because usually you used to go to restaurant to eat, and it'll be, a Campos de Solana wine, nothing else. If you wanted to drink something of the stuff that you brought to La Paz, you had to be either in Tarija, Sinti, or somewhere, that only the producers will maybe distribute. But I think GUSTU had to do a lot of this, and I thank you a lot, because you opened my eyes to the whole wine world. And me, I go to your restaurant and I come out of there with 8-9 bottles every time that I come back from the United States. So GUSTU has to do a lot, and hopefully a lot of people keep on getting interested in doing new things and just growing.
Of course, but I don't. Yeah, thank you, but I in the end I do not believe that we did much more than maybe just taking a chance and maybe giving some tools to other people to actually explore what they maybe wanted to explore. But I think that when you look to, for example, the city of La Paz right now, in terms of restaurants who have started to work with wine, then maybe I and us at GUSTU, we began bringing wine from different locations. But one thing is to be able to have a great relationship to a producer more than anything, to push them and to do something different. But if the words that I say does not go into other restaurants, for example, who start buying the same types of wine and making sure that we are all going in the same direction in terms of what drinks, wine, beers, etc. that we want to consume, then this wouldn't have worked out. And who knows if this market was not here. I'm not even sure that Maria Jose and Mercedes, who is in this class, would have gone in the direction that they were going in. So maybe a lot of people needed us, but more than anything, we need them. And if there aren't people who dare taking risks with us, then you're just taking a leap of faith, but you might just hit the asphalt when you land on the ground. So to a certain extent, I think it's very important that producers have actually been willing to open their eyes or opening their mind more than anything to try new stuff. And I don't think that we did all of this alone. I'm very thankful that people do think that, because that means that at least we moved something, but we're not that important. Let's say it like that, and let's continue before it becomes too much about us. In the end, I think more than anything, when we talk about export, which is the last part that I kind of want to speak about, because I also think that it's important. I love when a wine country have the possibility to consume the majority of their produce within the own country, but I also think that sometimes it's very important to start exporting certain produce as long as you're focused. Right now, as I mentioned, then Singani, gin, vodka, you can find around the world, and that have basically given a good baseline, and maybe more than anything given a couple of importers or distributors in other countries the knowledge on how to actually get things from Bolivia into their specific area. I think wine a little bit is coming along. First of all, Aranjuez, Colberg, Campos de Solana, Casa Real in Singani, 1750 from Samaipata. These guys have begun exporting wine more than anything to locations that makes a lot of sense. But more than anything, which I think that most of you may have noticed, that I have a thing for small quantity wine and small producers. Then the reason why I write focused export in the bottom of this one as the last point is that focused export is extremely important. That means that with many of the small producers, they don't have the same chances of export as many of the larger producers, more than anything due to the quantity is just not there.
How do you see the coming years when it comes for Bolivia to have good wine for export?
So first of all, I've been very proud within the last 2 years that we managed to get. Why I write focused export is to assure that people that either I know or people that I trust or that I trust can have wine in, for example, the wine list at a restaurant, who can tell the right story and sell the wine the right way. This is where we need to get the small producers in. Recently, inside the last 2 years, I've been very happy to see that Cepa de Oro, Tierra Roja, and Marcelo Baca Flores, that are all located in Valdiricinte, got their wines in all 3 restaurants of Virgilio Martinez and Pia León, Central, Mil, y Kioya. 2 of them located in Lima and 1 located in Cusco. And for me, this is what I mean about focused export, that you need to get it in either through friends or whatever it is. Try to, you know, try to convince them that wine from Bolivia is super interesting and that they need to work with it. So I see a lot of great future in terms of Bolivian wine, but I think it's important, first of all, that some of the small producers grow in terms of quantity. The question is, how much do they grow? That's a huge question. Many of the producers that I work with at the current moment, I ask them simply to try to reach the double amount of bottles, and then maybe one day, by some of my contacts, I can figure out if we can get a pallet of mixed stuff from different producers into a different country. It's something I've been discussing with a very good friend of mine from Denmark, who has a fantastic, how do you say, a distributor import firm in Copenhagen that is called Rosford, that maybe one day we can actually figure out to at least fill up one pallet and then basically ship one pallet of mixed wine from Cinti or from Cinti Tarija or from Bolivia entirely. I think there is a huge future, but of course it's going to take time. And in this case, when it comes to the potential of exporting wine of Bolivia, you need a lot of patience. Because if you start with the most obvious producer, because they're in here, that the Negra Criolla that I showed in a picture earlier, they produced, I think, 600 bottles of it in 2019. 600 bottles. I mean, that's not a lot of wine. And first of all, I need to have wine. That's one thing. And then other people can start having it. Meaning, of course, if they start reaching at least the double, and then maybe the year after a bit more, then bit by bit we can actually start sending wine out. So the potential is huge, but I don't believe that exporting fantastic Bolivian wine is, how do you say, inside the next year or two. This might be in 5 years' time that you really see something start showing up on shelves and or wine lists around the world. And that's it.
Fantastic.
For this presentation, at least.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertil. It was wonderful. Now we can begin with our session of questions. I don't know if somebody have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about the financing. Do you think they get a lot of money to actually operate like those wine grapes?
You're thinking in terms of the big producers or in terms of the smaller producers?
No, the small producers. I heard some FDIs actually give some money, some credits to them, and they try to tell them how to actually do it, how to actually grow. But I'm not quite sure if that's true. That's what they say. I don't know if you have seen something.
I've heard a bit about that support is happening from different parts in Valle Cinti, if it comes from either the town hall or the alcaldía or something like this. But I must admit to say that in general, when it comes to either beverage production, if it's either the distilleries or the vegetable producer or the restaurant that is doing something in this direction, the support from either government or alcaldía is extremely limited here in this country.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos, for your question. And now, who else? What about Gigi, Gilda? Come on, girls, shoot it.
I'm fine.
Maria Jose?
Well, I would like to add to what Bertil just said, that land in Bolivia is very expensive compared to other places that make wine. I did some comparing once a few years ago, around, I don't know, 8 years ago, and land in Tarija is more expensive than in Cognac. And
Wow.
the price of Singani is a lot cheaper than in Cognac. I guess it, like I'm speaking about a normal vineyard in Cognac. So it's crazy, and that's one of the reasons why our wines are a lot more expensive than wines in our neighboring countries. Like land in Bolivia is more expensive than in Valle de Uco, Mendoza, for example.
Why is that, Majo?
I think there are a few reasons, but the main one is that Bolivians, especially, I'm going to speak about Tarija, and we're not a very industrialized department, and people live off their lands, and one of the things they do is speculate on the prices of land. And that's why they keep rising and rising without a real reason for the price to be risen.
Okay. And also, I think that the viticulture there is quite extreme, especially your area in Jardín Oculto is kind of it's extreme. Is what in Europe that would be heroic viticulture. So that makes a difference.
Yes, definitely. And I think most vineyards in Bolivia are heroic viticulture. Many people might be fair on this, but you always have issues when growing vines in Bolivia. Well, you have the weather, but also you have lots of social turmoils, and that requires a lot of heroism to grow and be part of I don't know, growing a vineyard.
Very good. Alejandro, Majo, Kamal.
I think I got actually all of my questions answered.
What about Lourdes?
Hello, good night. Thank
Hola,
you.
Lourdes. How are you?
Nice to meet you. I want to ask to you if from the government, do you have any project or something to promote this viticulture from Bolivia, or what do you think about?
We had elections last week. We've had elections last week, and this country politically have been quite a mess within the last year or so.
Yes, like in all Latin America.
If there are any projects right now, I have a strong doubt that they have gotten to think about this. I don't think in general that the government in Bolivia have had too much thought in terms of, how do you say, helping out either the viticulture or the beverage scene. I don't think they necessarily have too much interest in either what can create a better situation for Bolivia as a tourism country, or to look better from the outside, for an example. But I prefer not to speak too much about politics.
Okay. And what about the communication?
It's a very sore subject right now to speak about politics because
yes, I understand. And what about the communication? Because what somebody said before, I think the same, like GUSTU, you make a very good work, to promote these things. And do you think there are more people doing this? Maybe you need to do more communication, at least in the region, no? To promote all these things.
We are not the only one anymore. No, there are so many people around who are doing a huge amount of work in terms of getting Bolivia to become more interesting. But if this comes from necessarily the government, the previous government or the previous government, I don't think that this necessarily would ever come from a how do you say, like an apoyo or support from any governmental part of this country. I think in general, this entire industry, whether or not you're making wine or singani or cooking or in this sector somehow, I mean, we can even go into theater or artists. I mean, in this entire direction of creativity is very, very little supported from the government in general. I think we stand quite alone, but that's exactly why it's very important that that entire sector actually somehow is standing together. Whether or not there are many, many more restaurants. I mean, Lourdes, you were here in Bolivia, what, four years ago? It must have been 3-4 years ago. See, and at this moment, I mean, GUSTU have basically been one of the only and single interesting restaurants who are trying to do something different from what they were doing before. The city of La Paz only have completely changed from when you were here 4 years ago, and you can actually come here for an entire week and eat a new fantastic meal every single day you're here. So I think that the industry is kind of building together, and this is in between the restaurants, the wine producers, the distilleries, the breweries, the art scene, and so on. That they are basically building something together, but in the end, this specific industry is standing quite alone in a country like Bolivia at this current moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lourdes. Bertil, I have a question about Tanat.
Yes.
Do you have the opportunity to make a wine tasting between Tanat from Uruguay and Tanat from Bolivia?
If I have?
Yes.
No, I would rather prefer not to.
Why?
I absolutely think Tanat is one of the worst grapes that exist in the entire world, whether or not it comes from Bolivia or Uruguay or France or whatever.
Bertil, I used to think the same, but you have to try the one from El Porvenir in Cafayate. Have you tried it?
Probably not. I tend to avoid Tanat as much as I can.
Well, I have many fights with Uruguayan friends because of that, like 20 years ago. But the El Porvenir one is really smooth. It's extraction is very light, and the tannins are softened. It's a very cold fermentation, so you have something that is silky. Believe me,
well, to begin with,
it's a drinkable wine.
Es muy sedoso en boca.
I think in general that this actually what you just explained explains why Bolivian Tanat is very interesting in front of French and Uruguayan Tanat, for example, where often the main reason why I think Tanat is a terrible grape is exactly what you mentioned, that Tanat have a tendency not to be smooth. It have a tendency to be so tannic that I feel like when I put a glass of Tanat in my mouth, it's like putting razor blades and you know, my mouth is fucked up for the next week. I think in general, Bolivian Tanat suits me much better than much other, and maybe this Porvenir is a very interesting Tanat, which I'll definitely take the recommendation.
If you have the chance, just grab a bottle. The other one that it was to me like an outstanding one is the carbonic one from Pisorno in Uruguay. They have like a carbonic maceration. Pisorno. It's a Canelones. It's very nearby the Puerto de Montevideo. And to me, the best wine of the whole winery, Pisorno, is that carbonic maceration Tanat. It's fresh. It's something to drink in the year, no? But it really is. That's my two favorites, no? But I totally agree that Tanat tends to be difficult to drink and very, I agree with that. So
I do think so, but I mean, if maybe the question is also directed towards what makes Bolivian Tanat interesting, I mean, I do think that many of the things that you're exactly mentioning that makes these two Tanats good for you is what you can say about a lot of Tanat from Bolivia, that there is something about the climate, something about the altitude, maybe it's the sun who ripens the tannins much better, makes the wine much easier to drink and much, I mean, the tannins much smoother. And
yes.
easy to
They are
understand.
filtered.
I think in general, when sure, I do not like to drink too much Tanat, whether or not it's from here or from other places, but I do think that Bolivian Tanat really have something to offer. That also means that, of course, I mean, in the end, I don't like Tanat because it doesn't suit me and my palate.
Yeah,
But I think if there are
taste.
people in the group here as well that do usually enjoy to drink Tanat, I think it's a good thing, especially if you haven't tried Bolivian Tanat, to try this, or like Maria Caro is asking, if I try to do a vertical tasting of Tanat from different locations, I think it's an interesting way to go. I just prefer, or I at least have preferred so far, to try to avoid exactly that.
Okay. Thank you. And I have a last one about the origin appellation. Which of the valleys do you think that is, I don't know if you know, which of the valleys is in the process to obtain the origin appellation?
Well, there are more. The Vischuqueña and the Moscatel de Alejandria already have a DO in Valle de Cinti. But maybe I have touched very little upon when it comes to wine laws here in the country. That wine laws is, I think, sometimes more created for looking better than your neighbor. It often doesn't necessarily have something that's very set in stone. That means that there's not a lot of government that is actually checking up if you are inside the rules that you're supposed to, more than anything, because there are really no rules. You can have a denominación de origen of Moscatel de Alejandria from Cinti by basically producing Moscatel de Alejandria in Cinti. And then you need to be friends with the right people and stuff like this, meaning that you know, there are possibilities for much more either wine laws or much more DOs and so on. I am at this current moment not sure that it's necessarily the most important way to go with right now. I think that some producers in this country, or many of the producers actually, if it's not all of them, need to start going together and try to figure out this entire thing. And maybe back to the question from Lourdes, if there is any support from the government, this is very difficult due to the fact that there isn't any support, meaning a lot of people or a lot of producers are close to the deal. I have a tendency to not necessarily recommend them to do so.
Se está hablando un montón de los vinos de Bolivia.
Juan.
Y además...
Hi. Hola, Juan. Juan?
Yeah, Juan Molano.
Juan Molano.
Sorry.
Hello. Welcome.
Well, as I was saying, that hopefully the DO system can become much more interesting. But at this current moment, it feels like we're still a little bit far away, and that producers maybe, and this is something I am trying to pinpoint for a couple of producers in Cinti, that maybe if they get together and stop being either jealous or angry at their neighbors or think that one looks nicer than the other, then it could be fun to see them actually gathering a huge association where basically everyone is welcome and where everyone can establish some sort of rules. But if this is slightly far away, most likely as well.
I think you and I had a similar conversation last time I was in Bolivia. We were talking about how the different venues, the different restaurants see each other as concurrent instead of seeing us a fellow colleague in the industry. Here in Sweden and Scandinavia, I think everybody sees each other as a fellow colleague more than a concurrent. Everybody helps each other and do everything together because together they're strong and gather. They can do a bigger impact. And in Bolivia, it's more that the different venues go more for themselves and think that concurrence is a bad thing. And you're talking about, I think what you're talking about is similar when it comes also to different vineyards as well, that they don't see collaboration as a good thing. Or have misunderstood this.
No. I think you're completely right. I exactly think that this is part of the situation, this current moment, that there is. I mean, I really don't know how this works, but I mean, as I'm from Denmark, I come from exactly the same as Alejandro is saying, that in Copenhagen we used to be friends and colleagues, and we wanted to grow together, whether or not that your restaurant was located next to each other. Here in Bolivia, sometimes there can be a lot of bad rumors, or you speak bad about another place instead of actually just thinking that you're a great colleague and you can respect the work of someone else. I think also when it comes to wine, that this can be very much so. I think even when it comes, I know that I'm mentioning Maria Jose and Mercedes a lot, and I'm sorry, it's because you're here right now. But I think that Maria Jose and Mercedes, who have their winery in Tarija, and they come from Tarija, and then they're coming to Valle de Cinti to get grapes and so on, then they're not necessarily being bid welcome by the people from Cinti, because, you know, they're from Tarija and they should stay there and they should make their wine there, and they're not completely welcome here. I don't know, can you nod if it's correct what I'm saying? Yeah, they're nodding. It's very much correct what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No, exactly, and I think, of course, it's important, exactly like you're saying, Alejandro, that we kind of get together. For an example, I have a fantastic friend who absolutely cooks amazing, and I respect him as a motherfucker because he's a great cook, and I couldn't respect this guy more. And he's a French guy who lives in Sobocachi in La Paz, who is called Ludo, and he makes just the best food in the entire city, and I prefer to eat with this guy. And I think it's sometimes sad to see that restaurants or wineries or so on cannot sometimes just choose to respect each other for the work that they do, whether or not it's hamburgers or pizzas, or if it's red or white wine, or if it's Tanat or Vischoqueña. I think exactly like you're saying, that if wine culture, drinking culture, or gastronomy culture, etc., has to go to a different level in a country like Bolivia, it's important that the entire country sticks together, especially the ones in the industry. And this is once again going back to Lourdes' question, that if the government is not helping, then it doesn't work if the industry is not helping each other at the same time. If that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. I think every country actually has been in that point somehow. It doesn't matter if it's Bolivia or Sweden, Denmark, or Italy. I think everybody's been there. Is that everything has to evolve, and right now everything is evolving in the country, and that does it so interesting. I think the whole continent as a big region, because it's that's gonna produce more fantastic wine, more great producers, and yeah, slowly it's gonna be growing.
Well, Alejandro, it looks that you are in the industry.
Yeah.
It's a kind of conversation when you are in the industry.
Alejandro
Amazing inputs.
makes amazing cocktails in Stockholm for the ones who are traveling to Stockholm. So.
Very nice.
You're more than welcome.
Well, thank you so much. Bertil, I don't know if you want to finish this session with
I have one more question, please.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Bertil, you said you live in La Paz. Would you, I don't know where I can get all the wines you mentioned, because I don't think all of the wines are in the supermarkets, like in Quetal or Hipermaxi. Where can I get them?
You can come to GUSTU and we give you a fucking fantastic price.
Oh, that's amazing.
Well, besides that, of course, there are a couple of other locations that work with a similar amount of wine. But for an example, in GUSTU, we offer a 20% discount of wine that you take away. So you can see it as your local bodega if you come by.
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
I'm always happy, Carlos, if you want to come to GUSTU to pick up something. I'll be happy to take you down to the wine cellar so you can choose freely.
Oh my God. That's amazing. I actually have 3 friends here that are really interested, Alejandro Cruz and Ignacio Malpartida. we would like to, I don't know, visit you there someday. I don't know when can we go?
But don't you think that Alejandro, he can show up at any point he wants?
Yeah, he used to work there, right?
Yes,
He's a
yes, don't
family
worry,
member.
Carlos. I will show you. Hi, Bertil. How are you?
Of course, you can show up at any point you want. Anyone can. I mean, Lourdes, Majo, Carlos, Martin, etc. Every single time you come to Bolivia, you just come by.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's lovely.
I will. I need
Hey,
to go back to Bolivia.
Hey, Bertil, I'm a little sad. You never took me to the cellar. And I think I bought a lot of wine from you.
No, but you're not welcome because you drink too much.
Right? That's true.
I'll take you to the cellar as well, Luis, next time.
Okay. Hope that we can soon are able to travel to Bolivia. I was just
Yes, I
talking
know.
with
I really want to go to and meet the whole team.
And visit Majo's wine cellar.
Oh, yes, we can make a food and wine trip to Bolivia.
Totally.
Some table trip, food and wine trip.
I'm in, and I'm sure that Mercedes and Maria Jose is ready to welcome all of you. I'm sorry for inviting everyone.
No, you're
Come
more
on,
than
Majo, say yes.
Okay. So yeah, hope that, well, we need to be to have the boundaries open. I think that we from Argentina we cannot even, you cannot even send the wine, Majo, that I'm waiting.
Yes, I can send them right now. Maybe next month, they told me.
I can't believe it, man. I can't believe it, man. We'll see. We'll wait.
We want to thank you all to be here all together, sharing with an amazing glass of wine. I'm so sad that it was not Bolivian wine. And the ones that have the opportunity to have a glass of Bolivian wine, I'm very envy of you guys. So really, really.
Where are you, Maria? Where are you?
I'm in Mexico City. City. Yes.
Okay.
So
were the one asking for the Singani.
Yeah, Maria Jose told me that I can order by Mercado Libre, so she's gonna do it. And Bertil, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate this session, your professionalism, and all the values info that you share with us. And thank you for all you people to be part of Some Table community. This is your house, this is your home. We invite you as a community and as an expert to follow us and be part of our community. Bertie, say you hi. and really.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you to you all. It was a pleasure. Bertil, gracias total.
Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, de verdad.
Muchas gracias a todos.
Gracias. Buenas noches. Good night, Carlos, Alejandro, Gilda, María José, Majo.
Cheers, cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye. Bye.